Tonight, Steve Osensami looking back at Chuck Norris and his career.
Have you ever wondered, behind the magnificent smiles of the silver screen sirens, the most haughty roses of Hollywood, how many secrets have been buried beneath the layers of the dust of time? In a world where fame often goes hand in hand with falsehood, is there any sincere bond strong enough to overcome the harshness of reality? Or is true love merely a specter lurking behind the cold glare of the camera flashes? Only a few weeks after the legend departed this world on a silent winter night, Hollywood was shaken to its very roots by an unprecedented event. Amidst the somber space, thick with the scent of oak and the aged paper of the library at his private ranch in Texas, his final, meticulously sealed memoir was officially announced under a jaundiced yellow light, marking the moment when the secrets stifled for many decades were voiced for the first time. Before closing his eyes for the last time, the bold Iron Man of Hollywood did the unthinkable. He shattered a half-century of silence to reveal the identities of the 6 screen starlets with whom he once had clandestine affairs. Accompanying the stack of old letters sent to his lovers from years past was a scrap of paper with a haunting handwritten note. The world worships those roses as immortal stars, but only I have held their trembling souls behind the velvet curtain. Now, as the sunset of my life has closed, I cannot carry this warmth down to the deep grave while still owing my beloveds an apology for the moments we stole from destiny to warm the cold solitude amidst this capital of vain brilliance. In today's vibrating journey back through time, let us strip away the velvet layers together to discover the secrets hidden for decades behind the spotlight. The 6 roses who were once the entire world to Chuck Norris, the roses of the screen who once had illicit affairs with the actor, whom he used a lifetime of silence to protect until his very last breath. 1. Marilyn Monroe, the forbidden affair and the blood testament of Lake Tahoe. During the sweltering summer days of July 1962, the cinematic capital of Hollywood seemed to hold its collective breath before the silent fracturing of the most seductive icon of all time. Marilyn Monroe was living through the most horrific hours of her existence as she became the focal point of a brutal power struggle between the Kennedy brothers and the cold, relentless surveillance of the FBI. To seek a temporary escape from that suffocating atmosphere, she fled to the Calneva Lodge, a casino riddled with eavesdropping devices planted everywhere by Frank Sinatra. It was here that destiny brought her to meet Chuck Norris, who at the time was merely a young serviceman with a resolute gaze and a pure heart, yet untainted by the vanity of the showbiz world. Chuck was hired with the sole mission of guarding the private passageway leading from Marilyn's bungalow to the casino, but he quickly became the only harbor for the shattering soul of the most beautiful woman in the world. Their relationship did not begin with flashy flirtations, but with a quiet, profound empathy between 2 people lost in a labyrinth of dark conspiracies. Chuck recalls the very first time she stepped out from the shadows of the bungalow, her face without a single trace of makeup, her eyes brimmed with tears, yet still exuding a lethal, undeniable attraction. She looked at him not as a bodyguard, but as a final lifeline before being submerged by the ghosts in black suits who were always stationed in the hallways. In a secret letter responding to her mounting anxieties, Chuck wrote with all the fortitude of a soldier, "Do not fear those ghosts in black suits any longer, Marilyn. For as long as I stand here, this entire world will not be able to touch even a single strand of your hair." Chuck witnessed Marilyn in her most broken moments, when she grew frantic believing the hotel's wooden walls were whispering her secrets back to Washington. It was within the darkness of that ultimate fear that an intense and desperate love blossomed, a romantic chapter that history has intentionally erased from its chronicles. Amidst the windswept Nevada nights, Chuck secretly took Marilyn away from the sniper scopes and infrared lenses to the desolate sands of Lake Tahoe. In an old military jeep, under a hazy moon mingled with the somber scent of pinewood and her familiar Chanel No. 5 perfume, they exchanged confessions that the world would never be allowed to hear. Chuck once used his own heavy military coat to warm Marilyn's slender shoulders as she trembled from nightmares of betrayal and the lurking presence of death. These rendezvous were not merely carnal, but a dual escape of the soul, where Marilyn was permitted to shed the heavy crown of a sex symbol to become a young girl in need of comfort and protection. In a letter written in haste on a piece of casino stationery, hidden deep at the bottom of a drawer, Marilyn confessed in trembling handwriting that, amidst this world full of masks and wiretaps, only in his arms did she feel she could truly breathe. She added that he was the only person who looked into her eyes and saw a woman yearning to be loved, rather than an icon for people to possess and torment until death. One of the most dramatic moments was the fateful night in room 52 when the heavy footsteps of FBI agents approached the wooden door and the clicking of tape reels spun threateningly. In the cramped space, their breaths intertwined, suffocating with fear yet burning with the desire of those challenging fate. Instead of cowering, they shared a final passionate kiss, as if it were the final moment of life. A kiss bearing the salt of tears and the bitterness of despair. Chuck used the prowess of a soldier to fake the scene in just seconds, diverting prying eyes and protecting his lover's honor right under the enemy's gun barrels. However, this tearful romantic chapter closed with a painful tragedy just a few weeks later when Marilyn was found to have drawn her last breath in utter solitude at her private home. Chuck Norris revealed that the most precious memento he still keeps is a gold-plated lighter engraved with an exquisite M, but it still bears a faint trace of dried blood, evidence of the desperate struggle in her final moments. Chuck once confessed in a diary entry sent privately to her, which he later locked away in a secure cabinet. "If destiny forces us to vanish into the Tahoe mist, I pray to be the eternal darkness to envelop and keep your light from ever being extinguished." Accompanying it was a final, haunting message from Marilyn, written on a small, crumpled piece of paper, stating that, if this flame dies out, remember that she was at her most radiant when she was with him, and do not let them use lies to cover the truth that they once belonged to each other. Through a secret military communication line, this memento was sent to Chuck as a blood testament, confirming that the woman had tried to call his name, trying to cling to the last ray of hope from the Iron Man before being smothered by filthy political conspiracies. For decades, Chuck has kept this evidence in a secure safe, viewing it as a living witness to a love murdered in the heart of a cruel Hollywood. A secret he swore to take to the grave, if not for this final memoir. 2. Ava Gardner, The Diamond Escape and the Feverish Night in London. In the winter of 1975, London emerged with the melancholy of persistent drizzles and a leaden-gray atmosphere, concealing the silent collapse of one of the most magnificent beauties in cinematic history. Ava Gardner, the haughty rose with the most radiant allure of the century, was living in seclusion at a luxury apartment near Hyde Park, yet her soul was imprisoned by an extreme, paralyzing fear. This was an era of bombings and instability in Britain, making her isolation feel more suffocating than ever before. Her brilliant past in Spain suddenly became a double-edged sword when ghosts from her history seized sensitive photographs and initiated a ruthless blackmail campaign. They threatened to leak those images to the tabloids, annihilating the final shred of dignity belonging to a legend who had once reigned at the pinnacle of fame. Chuck Norris appeared amidst that crisis, not as a star, but as a silent troubleshooter, an Iron Man quietly playing the role of a private bodyguard at the Dorchester to shield her from these malicious strikes. A woman being smothered by her own legend, and an Iron Man who always maintained his sobriety amidst treacherous traps. Ava, in the intoxication of wine and despair, found in Chuck something that famous lovers like Frank Sinatra or Howard Hughes had never given her: absolute safety without the need for possession. On those stifling London nights, they often met clandestinely in the silent hidden corners behind the ancient brick walls of the hotel's wine cellar. In the flickering candlelight, amidst the scent of oak and the dampness of history, they shared silences that no wiretap could ever touch. Ava was once so panicked she believed every rattle of the room's heating system was the sound of a recording device, and only when gripping Chuck's rugged hand did she find reality. In his secret compartment, Chuck still cherishes a letter from Ava, saturated with French perfume and written with lines of shattered pride. "Chuck, they can steal the photos, they can stain my reputation across every front page, but they can never touch the memory of your warmth at the Dorchester. The only thing that made me feel like a real woman again, and not an obsolete piece of decoration." Their romance always carried the flavor of danger and death lurking within the London fog. The scandal reached its breaking point on a torrential night at the hotel's back entrance, where the darkness seemed to swallow all light. A freelance paparazzo, actually a henchman for the blackmailers, ambushed them, catching them in an extremely sensitive position. The mechanical clatter of the camera shutter rang out like the loading of a gun destined to execute a career. A dramatic struggle erupted right in the shadows of the narrow alleyway. Chuck utilized his full range of close-quarters combat skills to disarm the assailant and destroy the film roll containing Ava's secrets right before her astonished eyes. In that microsecond, on the thin line between destruction and salvation, under the cold rain mingling with the blood from a cut on Chuck's hand, Ava handed him a rough diamond, the final keepsake from a gemstone mine she once owned in South America. That unpolished stone was identical to their feelings, raw, original, and indestructible. Chuck Norris recorded his words to her in a carefully hidden reply. "Ava, amidst a world full of predators who only want to strip you bare to gaze upon you, I pray to be the sturdiest shield to protect that fragility. Diamonds may sparkle, but the courage in your eyes tonight is the only thing I wish to engrave into my soul." When Chuck's military and intelligence connections finally extinguished the blackmail plot, forcing the culprits to vanish forever into the darkness, Ava Gardner had to return to her closed-off life. Their farewell took place quietly but breathlessly in the back of a sleek black limousine amidst a thick fog. There were no empty promises, only a burning kiss, bearing the bitterness of parting. She sent him a pair of silver cufflinks engraved with a dragon, his symbol of strength, accompanied by a note written in deep crimson lipstick like a sworn oath. "In this fake and hollow world, only your warmth that night is the only thing I still believe in." Chuck Norris wrote back the final lines intended only for her before these secrets were buried deep under the dust of time. "Ava, though my body may turn to dust tomorrow, my soul will eternally wander through the misty alleys of London, just to be once more the only one shielding you from the cruelty of this world." Throughout his life, he kept the secret of the rough diamond and those letters, viewing them as a testament to a brilliant but fleeting love with the exquisite lover who had once found her only peace in his protective arms. 3. Natalie Wood, Criminal Instinct and the Knights of the Texas Chase. In the summer of 1972, the scorching heat and blinding dust of Texas seemed intent on incinerating both the celluloid reels and the most extravagant illusions of Hollywood right on the set of a high-stakes crime action project. Natalie Wood, a woman of melancholic beauty whose dark velvet eyes always harbored an unnameable sorrow, was then besieged at the epicenter of a fracturing marriage to actor Robert Wagner. The film set that year was nothing short of a psychological battlefield, where Robert Wagner frequently appeared with a glamorous exterior but eyes filled with control and suspicion. Amidst the smoldering dramatic rages and the suffocating scrutiny of the press, Chuck Norris appeared like a silent specter, a secret gatekeeper hired to erect an invisible barrier around her. His mission was not merely to repel boisterous harassers, but to prevent Natalie from being submerged by her own profound solitude and the looming panic attacks within a private life shattered into 100 pieces behind the spotlight. Texas that year was hot not only from the dry desert temperatures, but from the proud resistance of a soul driven to the brink. Chuck, a man of harsh military discipline and iron silence, suddenly became the sole harbor for Natalie to pour out the melancholy she had suppressed for long years. Their affair did not begin with hollow, sweet words at a lavish banquet, but blossomed from violent collisions behind the lens amidst the scent of sweat and highway dust. The climax came one afternoon when tensions on set reached a breaking point due to Robert Wagner's constant interference in sensitive scenes. Natalie lost her composure and slapped Chuck across the face over a minor technical disagreement regarding a grappling stunt. A slap of desperation intended for the only man who dared to see through the bleeding pain behind her movie star smile. But instead of an angry reaction or a word of reproach, Chuck responded with a fierce, forced kiss right under the searing western sun. That kiss bore the salt of sweat mingled with dust, the bitterness of resistance, and the burning heat of a primal desire to be loved and protected that she had been forced to hide behind the aristocratic shell of the cinematic capital. From that moment, their clandestine rendezvous became a perilous game of hide-and-seek with destiny. They found each other at cheap motels along the desolate Texas highways where flickering, mournful red neon lights shielded two people playing the leads in their own sinful drama. Under the cold desert night, they drove battered convertibles into the void, temporarily escaping the surveillance of the private detective ghosts Wagner had planted everywhere. Chuck once found a small scrap of paper Natalie had hurriedly tucked into his coat pocket after a breathless night evading paparazzi lenses. She wrote in trembling, raw script, "Chuck, in this scorching Texas heat, only your coldness soothes the fear within me. If Robert learns this truth, let that gunshot finish me right in your arms, rather than having to return to the deception out there." The scandal reached its peak when the press nearly caught them in an extremely sensitive position right in the convertible during a chase in a deserted parking lot. Romance here held no place for roses or scented candles. It reeked of gunpowder and highway exhaust. Each meeting was a dangerous wager with the lifelong reputation and career of a superstar. Chuck Norris once wrote a direct message in a secret handwritten letter to her, the words of a man willing to sacrifice everything to keep her light from being extinguished by the brutality of public opinion. "Natalie, Hollywood taught you how to act as a happy woman, but Texas will teach you how to live as a real one. As long as I hold this gun, no ghost from the past can touch you." When the film wrapped with brutal final scenes, their affair was also hacked to pieces by the ambition and ruthless manipulation of studio moguls. Natalie was forced to choose absolute silence to protect her status, returning to the magnificent but empty golden cage beside her powerful husband. Chuck departed, carrying a spent shell casing engraved with Natalie's name, a cold piece of evidence for a love of a sinful nature, but the most authentic he had ever known. In the drawer holding his most painful memories, he left a final confession intended only for her soul after her mysterious death at sea. "Natalie, though this world may remember you through the cold waves of the ocean, in the cabinet of my soul, you will forever be the most brilliant flame amidst the Texas prairie, the only storm I never wanted to extinguish." It was not until decades later, when the ghosts of the past had faded into the mists of time, that Chuck Norris found the courage to reveal the brutal truth behind that night's scandal. On that fateful night in a cheap motel room, when the clicking of prowling footsteps sounded outside the window, a hungry private investigator hired by Wagner to catch them in the act, Natalie Wood completely lost control due to long-accumulated fear. In a state of extreme panic, mingled with a mad jealousy toward her own destiny, she lunged for Chuck's gun and pulled the trigger. The dry explosion tore through the Texas silence, the live round slamming directly into the wooden doorframe, just inches from the stranger's head. Amidst the thick gunpowder smoke and the paroxysmal trembling of his lover, it was Chuck Norris, by the cold instinct of a professional soldier who lunged to disarm her before she could fire a second fatal shot. He not only silently hid that gun in a secret compartment of his Jeep, but used his dust-covered hands to wipe away every trace of the scene, using military connections to make that detective vanish forever, saving her from prison and the total destruction of her career. Chuck chose to stand quietly in the shadows, watching Natalie return to her fake, glamorous life, keeping for himself the warmth of those burning Texas nights, the only place she truly belonged to him, completely and for real. 4. Anne Margaret, the sinful dance and the violent jealousy of Elvis Presley. Las Vegas in 1964 was not merely the capital of high-stakes gambling. It was a furnace that incinerated souls longing for freedom. On the set of the blockbuster Viva Las Vegas, the air simmered with a sweltering heat, not just from the desert sun, but from the explosive presence of a fiery beauty with mesmerizing red hair, Anne Margaret. At the time, she was caught in a sensational romantic vortex with the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, a relationship trumpeted by the studios, but which was, in reality, a suffocating golden cage guarded by the aggressive Memphis Mafia. Chuck Norris appeared here as a young karate champion whom Elvis deeply admired, invited to serve as a secret sparring partner for the legendary singer himself. However, behind the martial arts sessions lay a silent and dangerous pact. Chuck was entrusted with the mission of protecting Anne Margaret from Elvis's overbearing control and, more importantly, thwarting the mafia casino bosses who sought to manipulate her for dark purposes. The love between Chuck and Anne Margaret blossomed like a resilient wildflower germinating in the heart of a harsh desert. While the world saw only a radiant and sultry Anne Margaret on stage beside Elvis's aura, only Chuck saw the absolute terror in her eyes the moment the camera lights flickered off. She was being coerced into slave contracts by the Vegas Mafia and blackmailed by secrets they held regarding her past. Their intimacy grew during brief breaks on set, amidst the scent of cigarette smoke and the heat radiating from the engines of luxury convertibles. Their dates were high-speed escapes into the vast Mojave Desert, the only place free from wiretaps or the prying eyes of the Memphis Mafia. Under the boundless starry sky of Nevada, Anne shed her sex symbol persona to weep uncontrollably on Chuck's shoulder, sharing the bitter emptiness of fame. Chuck Norris once wrote a steadfast message in a private letter to her, which he later cherished as his life's most sacred memento. Anne, no matter how magnificent another's crown may be, I will stand forever in this shadow to ensure the world sees only your smile and not the tears flowing backward into your heart. The scandal and drama reached a fever pitch when Elvis Presley, in a fit of wild jealousy upon discovering his teacher was spending too much time with his lover, mobilized an armed security team to scour the Strip. That fateful night, in a dark, damp parking garage, reeking of gasoline at the Continental Hotel, tragedy nearly struck as 3 henchmen of the Vegas Mafia caught Chuck attempting to smuggle Anne away. The silence was suddenly torn apart by the clatter of metal, and a brutal brawl ensued. Chuck had to single-handedly take down the mob assassins with all the cold ruthlessness of a combat instinct to rescue Anne from a clandestine abduction that could have ruined her life. But the Mafia did not let go easily. They threatened to use acid to destroy Anne's angelic face if she did not immediately end things with the anonymous fighter. And to protect the life and career of the woman he loved, Chuck had to perform the most painful act of his life, staging a fake attempted kidnapping and forcing Anne to return to Elvis Presley's arms as a facade of submission to divert the enemy. The day they parted was a late afternoon, as crimson as her own hair. Anne Margaret handed Chuck an award-winning gold record, but she smashed it in half with her own hands right before his eyes. On the sharp fragment, a smear of deep red lipstick remained like a parting in blood, proving that her heart had eternally shattered upon having to leave him for the golden cage. Decades later, the chilling truth behind Chuck's sudden departure from Vegas that year was fully revealed. That final night, he had secretly broken into a casino boss's office to destroy a sensitive tape recording involving a dealer's fatal accident that the Mafia used to control Anne. In exchange for their silence and her freedom, Chuck had to endure brutal torture, scars he hid for a lifetime under his martial arts uniform, just so his Vegas lover could continue to shine brightest in the cinematic sky without ever being stained by the darkness of crime again. In the secret drawer containing his final handwritten letters, he left a last message for the soul of his former lover. If in this life we were merely two intersecting lines amidst sinful Las Vegas, then in another life I pray to be the quietest bass note in the song Viva Las Vegas, just to eternally support the steps of your dance. 5. Jane Seymour, The Secret Vow at the Grand Hotel and the Timeless Scandal. In 1980, the misty Mackinac Island of Michigan appeared as an isolated world, a place where time stood still due to an absolute ban on motorized vehicles, leaving only the rhythmic clatter of horse hooves on ancient stone paths and the scent of deep purple lilacs mingling with the briny moisture from Lake Michigan. It was precisely here, behind the scenes of the romantic film Somewhere in Time, that a secret and breathtaking love story blossomed. Jane Seymour, possessing a transcendent Hollywood beauty, was at that time being smothered by the ruthless control of studio moguls. They vehemently forbade the budding romance between her and co-star Christopher Reeve, not out of morality, but out of fear that a romantic scandal would tarnish Reeve's standard hero image, a golden goose for whom they allowed no room for error. Chuck Norris appeared at Mackinac Island in the capacity of a security consultant, the only Iron Man capable of moving like a specter through the underground passages of the Grand Hotel to shield Jane from the hunt of studio contract enforcers. Beneath the poetic exterior of a resort island, the Grand Hotel became a labyrinth of filthy blackmail plots. Veteran paparazzi, planted by rival competitors, lurked constantly behind lakeside bushes or disguised themselves as service staff, merely waiting for a single moment of slip-up from Jane and Reeve. Chuck Norris became the guardian of sorrows, the only man Jane trusted implicitly to arrange brief, clandestine meetings amidst the ethereal fog blanketing Lake Michigan. Their affection was not measured by loud gestures, but through the white nights Chuck spent standing silently like a statue outside the balcony of room 520, where Jane often sought refuge to shed the burden of her superstar crown. In the flickering candlelight mingled with the hotel's scent of aged oak, Jane frequently wept uncontrollably on the Iron Man's shoulder, confessing she felt like a prisoner trapped in an aristocratic yet suffocating Edwardian silk gown, and that Chuck's silent presence was the only reality that made her feel alive. The looming dangers and stalking perils erupted to a breathless peak on a night of violent storms over Lake Michigan, when a veteran private investigator who had been silently trailing them for weeks, nearly caught Jane stepping out of Reeve's room red-handed. In that hair-breadth moment, Chuck Norris utilized the sharp intuition of a professional soldier to forge a perfect alibi. Just as the detective prepared to raise his camera from the shadows of the hallway, Chuck suddenly materialized, draping his own military cloak over Jane's shoulders and feigning a stern escort, walking her along the long porch to discuss newly intensified security measures, causing the news hound to lose track entirely and believe he had been mistaken. Chuck Norris once wrote a steadfast message in a private letter to her, the words of a man willing to be an invisible shield. Jane, in a world only waiting to tear apart beautiful things, I pray to be the silent darkness, so your light may remain whole. Do not fear time, for even when the clock hands stop, the warmth of you on my shoulder tonight is eternal. When the film wrapped with bitter tears of parting, Jane was forced to leave her silent protector to continue her role as a flawless superstar before the public, returning to her slave contracts in Hollywood. On the day of their farewell at the Mackinac Island ferry dock, amidst the mournful echo of the ship's horn and the dense fog, she gifted Chuck a vintage pocket watch, a key prop from the film. But inside the glass face was a tiny, jagged crack. It was a precise metaphor for a heart shattered by the choice of fame over true love. Chuck Norris kept that memento in his most secret drawer for over 40 years. In the final letter left for her before these secrets were revealed, he wrote, "Jane, the world may remember you through those dreamy films, but to me, you will forever be the woman who stole time with me amidst the Mackinac mist, a beautiful secret that even death cannot strip of that night's warmth. 6. Sybil Shepherd, The Escape Dream and the Silent Pact at Union Station. In 1985, while the entire world was immersed in the brilliant flashbulbs of the Golden Globe Awards, a private tragedy was besieging Sybil Shepherd. The magnificent beauty she displayed while accepting her award for the series Moonlighting was, in truth, merely a mask concealing mental exhaustion. Behind the victorious smile lay a brutal reality, a toxic relationship and rampant conflicts on set that studio moguls had weaponized. They held a sensitive tape recording of her sharp, vitriolic criticisms regarding the hidden upper echelons of Hollywood, evidence enough to terminate her career in the blink of an eye. Chuck Norris, appearing as a guest of honor, inadvertently witnessed Sybil being threatened backstage by men in black suits. Driven by the instinct of a phantom protector, he decided to become the bodyguard for the bleeding soul of this broken woman. They found a rare peace within the silent luxury compartments of Union Station, where the scent of aged leather seats and the rhythmic drumming of rain on the station eaves created a space entirely divorced from the hollow noise of Los Angeles. It was here that they forged a daring plan to escape the grip of Hollywood in search of a simple life in the Midwest. However, that freedom was never destined to be easy. The scandal and the pursuit reached a fever pitch on a torrential night when a group of elite private investigators surrounded the station exits. To save Sybil, Chuck had to strike a dangerous silent pact with the studio bosses in the shadows of the train car. She would remain to finish the series to guarantee their profits. And he would take on the burden of permanently burying the secret of their flight, along with that sensitive tape. At the final moment at Union Station, as the train toward freedom prepared to roll and the mournful whistle tore through the curtain of rain, Chuck chose to stay behind to fulfill his vow to protect her. He stood silently under the freezing rain, his tall and solitary figure reflected on the damp granite of the platform, watching Sybil through the fogged glass of the receding train window. A final kiss was pressed by her onto the misty pane, a fragile and agonizing image marking the end of their dream of a simple life together. Chuck Norris once wrote his steadfast promise in a private letter to her before these secrets were included in his final memoir. Sybil, though the train whistle tonight signals our parting, I will hold this tape just as I hold your soul, pure and never to be stained by the lies of Hollywood. Chuck reveals that to this day, the original copy of that tape remains dormant in his most secure vault. The final piece of evidence of a lover who was once willing to leave the entire glittering world behind just to be with him. His silence over the decades was not merely the fulfillment of a contract. It was an act of worship for a love murdered in the heart of a cruel cinematic capital, ensuring that Sybil's soul remains forever free within the mind of the only man who never betrayed her. We who have traversed the many ups and downs of life surely understand that true love does not reside in loud acclaim, but in silent sacrifice, in the vow to keep a secret so that the one we love may remain bathed in light. These stories may gradually fade with time, but the warmth from Marilyn's lighter or the cracked glass of Jane Seymour's pocket watch will forever stand as a testament to a heart that once beat passionately in the heart of a cruel Hollywood. If this nostalgic journey has touched the deepest chords of your soul, please grant us a like and press subscribe to join us in turning back the golden pages of cinematic history. Do not forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next haunting and authentic memoirs with us.